Promotion is just the beginning. True management is the art of achieving results through the brilliance of others, not just yourself. Hello and welcome back. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are going to do something a little different. We are going to deconstruct a journey that millions of people take every single year, yet, and this is the frightening part, most take it without a map. I'm talking about the transition from being a doer to being a manager. We're diving deep into a text titled Asterisk. Effective Management Skills. Asterisk. Now, I know, the title sounds a bit dry. It sounds like a seminar you'd be forced to attend in a windowless conference room on a Tuesday afternoon. But I want you to stay with me. Because the contents of this book, specifically the first few chapters we're analyzing today, contain the blueprint for survival in the corporate world. Let's start with the fundamental shift. The overview. Imagine you are the best violinist in the orchestra. You are technically flawless. You know every note, every tempo, every nuance of the music. Because you are so good, the board of directors comes to you and says, "Congratulations, you are now the conductor." You put down your violin, you pick up the baton, and suddenly, you realize something terrifying. The skills that made you a great violinist, finger dexterity, breath control, individual practice, are almost entirely useless for being a conductor. As a conductor, you don't make the music anymore. Your success is now defined entirely by your ability to get other people to make the music. This is the core argument the text opens with. The transition to management is not a promotion, it's a career change. It requires a complete rewiring of your brain. You are moving from a world where your output is your own, to a world where your output is the creativity, expertise, and effort of others. If you try to continue playing the violin while waving the baton, you will fail. So, if we accept that we are now conductors, what is the first thing we need to do? According to Chapter 1, it's not ordering people around. It is goal setting. Now, I can hear you groaning. Goal setting? Really? That's the big insight? But hold on. The text argues that goal setting is the foundational function of management. It's the compass. Without it, you are just burning resources, time, money, and energy, in a circle. But here is where it gets interesting. The text warns us against arbitrary goals. You've seen these. A boss walks in and says, "Let's increase sales by 15% this year." Why 15%? Why not 20%? Why not 10%? If the goal is arbitrary, the commitment will be arbitrary. Instead, we need strategic alignment. Picture a pyramid. At the very top, you have the organization's strategy. Let's say the strategy is market dominance through speed. That is the North Star. Every goal below that must support speed. If a department head sets a goal that prioritizes cost cutting over speed, they are actually working against the company. The text describes a linked system. The organizational goal dictates the departmental goal, which dictates the team goal, which finally dictates the individual goal. It's a cascade. If there is a break in that chain, the machine falls apart. So, how do we set these goals? Do we just hand them down from Mount Olympus? Or do we let the employees decide? The text presents the classic dilemma, top-down versus bottom-up. Top-down is efficient. Here is your target, go hit it. This works for new employees who need direction. But for your veterans? For the people who know the customer better than you do, top-down is insulting. It kills morale. On the other hand, bottom-up, where the employee tells you what they want to achieve, is great for engagement, but it risks misalignment. The employee might set a goal that's too easy or irrelevant to the strategy. The solution? The hybrid approach, or what the text calls the negotiation. I love this concept. Goal setting shouldn't be a decree, it should be a negotiation. It's a conversation where management brings the what is necessary, the strategy, and the staff brings the what is feasible, the reality. They meet in the middle to forge a contract. And once you have that goal, it needs to pass the litmus test. The text outlines the characteristics of an effective goal, and they go beyond the standard SMART acronym we've all heard. Yes, it needs to be specific and measurable. But the text adds two crucial elements. 1. Is it recognized as important? Does the person doing the work understand why it matters? 2. Is it supported by rewards? You cannot ask for A-level performance and offer C-level incentives. Let's look at the case study mentioned. A sales director needs more revenue. The lazy manager says, "Sell more." The effective manager sits the agent down and says, "Listen, we need to recoup our investment costs to ensure job security for the team. To do that, looking at your territory, we need to move from $2 million to $2. $2 million. That's a 10% jump. Let's talk about how we get there. See the difference? One is a wish, the other is a business plan. But here is the trap. The dangerous trap that Chapter 1 warns us about. It's the results versus activity trap. We live in a culture that worships busy. We love empty inboxes. We love full calendars. We love late nights. But the text explicitly warns against activity-centered programs. Things like benchmarking, endless training, and process improvement workshops. These feel like work. They look like work. But unless they directly move the needle on the goal, they are illusions. The text references Robert Schaefer, who points out that managers fail because they focus on the process rather than the result. They assume employees are working at max capacity just because they are at their desks. Effective management is about stripping away the busy work to focus on the effective work. And when the work is done, you aren't finished. You have to do the after-action review AAR. This isn't a performance review where you judge the person. It's a review of the mission. What worked? What didn't? Did you have enough resources? The text gives us a beautiful piece of actionable insight here. If a goal was met too easily, you failed as a manager because you didn't challenge the potential of your team. If it was missed due to a skill gap, the next goal must include a training component. The cycle never ends, it just spirals upward. Now let's pivot. You have your strategy. You have your goals. You have your monitoring systems. But you are the conductor, remember? You need musicians. This brings us to Chapter 2, Recruiting Talent. The text makes a brutal assertion here. If you hire C-level employees, you will have a C-level organization. It doesn't matter how good your strategy is. It doesn't matter how much you spend on training. You cannot train ambition. You cannot train raw intelligence. You cannot train integrity. Recruitment is not an administrative task for HR. It is a business process. It is the act of turning raw inputs, applications, into high-performance outputs, human assets. So, how do we find the A players? We have to master the interview. The text breaks the interview down into a three-phase structure. And I want you to listen closely to this, because most managers wing it. They walk in, look at the resume for the first time, and say, "So, tell me about yourself." That is a waste of time. Phase 1 is the opening. This is 10% of the time. Your goal here is rapport. You want to lower the candidate's cortisol levels. Why? Because a nervous candidate gives you rehearsed answers. A comfortable candidate tells you the truth. You explain the structure, you make a joke, you find a commonality. You are setting the stage. Phase 2 is the main body. This is 80% of the time. This is where the detective work happens. The text suggests using the resume as a roadmap, but not as the Bible. You are looking for evidence. The text introduces the probing technique. If a candidate's resume says, "Increase sales by 25%, you don't just nod. You ask, "How? Was that price increases or volume? What exactly did you do versus what the market did?" You peel back the layers until you hit the bedrock of truth. You also use situational questions. What would you do if? Questions. These test problem solving. A great example given is asking a sales manager candidate. You have a high potential employee who hasn't exerted effort in 2 years. What do you do? Their answer reveals their management philosophy instantly. Phase 3 is the closing. The final 10%. You summarize, you outline next steps, and, crucially, you sell the company. If this is an A player, they have other options. You need to make them want you. But the interview is a minefield of psychological traps. The text warns us about the halo effect. This is when a candidate is well-dressed, articulate, and went to the same university as you. Because of these few, good traits, your brain assumes they are also hardworking, honest, and skilled. You let the halo blind you to their flaws. There's also mirroring, hiring people who remind you of yourself. And stereotyping. To combat this, the text suggests using a decision matrix. Score candidates on specific criteria immediately after the interview. Do not rely on your gut feeling 3 days later. Your gut is biased, the matrix is objective. Now, let's talk about the part of recruiting that everyone hates: reference checks. Most people think reference checks are a formality, a box to tick. The text argues that this is where the war is won or lost. The problem, especially in the US, is that companies are terrified of lawsuits. So if you call a reference, they might only give you dates of employment. Yes, John worked here from 2018 to 2020. That tells you nothing. So, how do you get the truth? The text suggests the Mornell method. ***. This is brilliant. You call the reference during lunch hours, when you know they won't be at their desk. You leave a voicemail. You say, "I'm calling about John Doe. We are considering him for a very important role. Please call me back." Here is the code. If John Doe was an absolute superstar, the reference will call you back immediately. They will want to help him. If John Doe was mediocre or toxic, you will likely never hear back. Silence is the loudest noise in the world of reference checks. Furthermore, use the phone. Do not email. You need to hear the hesitation in their voice. You need to hear the pause before they answer. Would you hire him again? That pause is worth 1,000 words. So, you've navigated the interview. You've dodged the halo effect. You've decoded the reference checks. You make the offer. You have hired an A player. Now comes the hardest part: keeping them. The text shifts gears in the final section of Chunk 2 and into Chunk 3, moving from recruitment to retention and work-life balance. It introduces the concept of the war for talent. ***, this isn't just a buzzword. It's the economic reality that in a knowledge economy, your assets go home every night. If you don't treat them right, they won't come back the next morning. The text argues that recruitment and retention are two sides of the same coin. There is no point in filling a bucket with water if the bucket has a hole in the bottom. And what is the biggest plug for that hole? Work-life balance, WLB. For decades, management viewed WLB as a perk. A nice to have. Something we give employees to be nice. The text refutes this entirely. It argues that WLB is a strategic business driver. It cites researchers Friedman, Christensen, and de Groot to propose a win-win perspective. The old view was a zero-sum game. If the employee spends time with their family, the company loses that time. The new view is that a well-balanced employee is more focused, more loyal, and more energetic. But how do we achieve this? It requires a paradigm shift. First, we must support the whole person. You cannot manage just the worker. You are managing a parent, a community member, a human being with anxieties and dreams. If you ignore the personal side, you lose the professional side. Second, we must shift from presence to results. This ties back to our earlier discussion on goal setting. If you measure people by how many hours they sit in a chair, you are encouraging presenteeism. You are encouraging burnout. If you measure results, you give them the freedom to manage their own lives. The text gives a powerful example of remote work and telecommuting, specifically citing AT&T in the 1990s. Now, remember, this was before Zoom. This was before Slack. AT&T found that remote workers worked an average of 1 hour more per day than office workers. They were more loyal. And the company saved $25 million in real estate. Why? Because when you give someone autonomy, they repay you with productivity. But remote work isn't for everyone. The text notes it works best for information-based roles and requires a culture of trust. If you are a micromanager, remote work is your nightmare. If you are a leader, it is your greatest tool. We also see strategies like flexible scheduling. The seasonal tax accountant who works 60 hours in March but 30 hours in July. The compressed workweek. These aren't just benefits. They are retention handcuffs. If you offer this flexibility and your competitor doesn't, your A player is never leaving. And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. The mechanism that makes all of this, goal setting, recruitment, retention, work-life balance, possible. Delegation. The summary of the text touches on the logic and mechanics of delegation. And while we don't have the full chapter here, the implication is clear based on everything we've discussed. Think about it. We started this episode with the violinist becoming the conductor. That transition is impossible without delegation. If you are obsessed with top-down control, you cannot delegate. If you hire C-level employees because you are afraid of being outshined, you cannot delegate because they can't do the job. If you don't trust your employees to have work-life balance, you cannot delegate. Delegation is the ultimate act of management. It is the proof that you have succeeded in the previous steps. If you have set clear, strategic goals, Chapter 1, then the employee knows what to do. If you have recruited an A player, Chapter 2, then the employee knows how to do it. If you have built a culture of retention and balance, Chapter 3, then the employee wants to do it. When those three things align, delegation isn't dumping work. It is empowerment. It is giving the baton to someone else for a moment, and letting them lead the section. The logic of delegation is simple. You are one person. You have 24 hours in a day. If you try to do it all, you become the bottleneck of your own organization. You become the limit on your team's growth. But if you delegate effectively, you multiply your capacity. You move from addition to multiplication. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into effective management skills, I want you to look at your own role. Are you still playing the violin? Are you clinging to the technical work because it feels safe? Because it feels like real work? Or are you ready to pick up the baton? Are you ready to set the strategy, hire the best, build a culture of trust, and then, most importantly, get out of the way? Because that is what effective management is. It's not about power. It's not about control. It is about creating an environment where other people can be great. Thank you for listening. Go out there and start conducting.